Hello, I'm Jim Demmer with Clark County Close-Up. Thank you for meeting with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
First, congratulations on your new position.
Well, thank you.
When did you start?
September 11th.
September 11th.
Inauspicious date to start because of association September 11th has with other events, but I look at that as a very good day.
Okay. Before we kind of talk about your role as a county administrator, let's talk about your background. Where were you born?
I was born in Virginia. My dad was an Air Force officer. He was assigned to Langley Air Force Base, and he met my mother in a bank there, and next thing you know, Mark's on the way. So, yeah, I lived in Virginia for quite a few years as a young child. Lived in Florida. Lived in France for 4 years, where my brother was born, and so I was well traveled as a youth.
Oh, where'd you attend school?
College?
College, yeah.
After we moved back to the U.S. from Singapore in 1971, my dad decided to move us to Oak Harbor up on Whidbey Island, and when I graduated high school, I went to Washington State and Pullman.
Oh, okay.
And I graduated in 1980 with a degree in business administration and a Bachelor of Accounting. And I was also in the ROTC program, and I was commissioned as a second lieutenant at that time.
Okay. Now I understand you spent over 20 years in the Army.
Yeah, close to 20 years, 20 and a half about, and I retired here in Clark County.
Okay. Well, where are some areas that you served in?
Well, I served in a number of U.S. states. Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Georgia, Kansas, New York, and I also spent 3 years in Germany.
Okay. What were some of the interesting posts that you served in, duties you did?
Well, probably the most interesting was in Frankfurt, Germany in 1991. The Desert War was winding down, and the drawdown, the peace dividend that George Bush the first started was suspended during the war, and then when the war ended, that drawdown resumed in earnest, and I landed in Frankfurt, and there were two Army Corps there, 7th and 5th, and the headquarters of the 7th was disbanded, and so 5th Corps absorbed 7th. So we had 110,000 enlisted soldiers, wow. And we were sending a bunch of those folks back to the United States because we were drawing down. We were changing unit organizations, we were moving units from place to place, and so there was just an enormous amount of work to do, and it was very challenging. And so I'd say that was probably my most interesting job.
Great. After serving in so many different locations, living in so many locations, what brought you to Clark County?
Well, in 1997, I was serving at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I had to begin thinking about where I wanted to go next. And I wanted to get out west because I knew at 20 years I wanted to retire. And so I called my branch manager in Washington, D.C., and I was told there was nothing available out west. And then I got a message from Recruiting Command saying that they were looking for recruiting battalion commanders. And I took the opportunity to scan through that message, and I discovered that Portland, Oregon was becoming available. And so I thought, well, I'll throw my hat in that ring. Hopefully I'll get selected, and hopefully I'll get my first choice. And wouldn't you know, that's what happened. And so I ended up coming to Portland to command that battalion in 1998. And then I submitted my retirement paperwork and retired in the summer of 2000.
Wow. So when did you start working for Clark County?
Kind of an interesting story there. I went to work for a staffing firm in Portland after I left military service. And my job was to marry up financial positions with financial talent. Okay. And I have a master's in business, I've got an accounting degree, and so that was a pretty good fit from a staffing perspective. But one day I noticed that Clark County was looking for two finance managers, one for community development and one for public works. And so I scooted across the river, hit the HR department, put an application in, and next thing you know, I'm getting an interview. And so I was subsequently hired by Pete Capel, our public works director, and served as his finance manager for 5 years.
What other positions have you held with the county?
Well, in 2006, Doug Johnston, our general services director, elected to retire. And Pete called me in one day and asked me if I'd ever thought about applying for that position. And I told him I had, and he encouraged me to apply, and so I did. And went through the interview process, and on 16 March 2006, I began work as the new General Services Director.
Okay. So in May, the previous county administrator, Bill Barron, announced he was going to be retiring in September. So how were you selected for this position?
Well, I was asked by one commissioner whether or not I'd be interested in considering the position, and I said I would have to think about it, and I did. And then I went to the other two and just expressed my interest, that if you were going to look for an internal candidate, that I'd certainly like to be considered. And what happened after that, I can't tell you. I just know that I was offered the job and decided to take it.
What attracted you to the position?
Well, I've worked for Clark County since January 2001. I've loved every minute of it. Great employees doing great things for the community. And the more of those folks I get to deal with, the more fun I'm going to have. And as the county administrator, I get to deal with virtually everyone. And so I like a challenge. I like to learn. And this is a challenging position. And by golly, I'm going to do a lot of learning. So it meets every criteria I have for a job that I'll enjoy.
Great. Let's talk a little bit more about the job, just for our viewers. What's the role of the county administrator?
Well, it's a multi-role position. I have representational duties where I represent the county at various functions around the county. I liaison with the neighborhood associations. I meet regularly with the city manager from Vancouver. I represent the county at social functions and other things. So that's one major role. A second role is to provide staff oversight for the commissioner departments, Public Works, Community Development, Public Health, General Services, and so on. The third role is to help the commissioners as they legislate, to bring before them subjects that they need to consider, alert them to threats and opportunities, and to manage their schedule. Put together the consent hearing agendas, put together the board time agendas, get things in executive session that need to be considered by the board where they need to provide guidance to staff. And so 3 major roles.
Okay. And then do you report directly to the county commissioners?
I do, yes. The chair of the board has slightly more influence over my daily activities than the other 2, but any of the 3 can talk to me and ask me for information, or give me guidance in various ways.
Okay. And how many staff do you oversee?
Oh goodness, the county has roughly 1,600 employees. Half of those, I would think, I don't have a specific number, but about half of them are in commissioner departments.
Okay. Now, according to this, to the county press release, this position will go through the end of 2014 with the option to extend for an additional year. Why is this a limited term appointment?
Well, there is an effort underway to create a county charter. And November 5th, next week, there's actually an election where the citizens of the county will be asked to elect freeholders. And those freeholders, 15 of them will comprise a board, and that board will work to put together a charter that may or may not change the shape and organization of the county's governance and governing mechanisms. Realizing that, and the potential that charter may call for an elected county executive, the board believed that doing a nationwide search, trying to attract a county administrator from elsewhere in the country would be difficult, knowing that the job term might be abbreviated.
Sure.
And so they elected to go with an internal candidate. And I also believe that they thought that an internal candidate would provide some stability. I mean, I'm a known quantity. I know many of the people in the county and have great relationships with them, and that from a stability point of view, hiring an internal would be a good thing.
Okay. So with the freeholder process, once the freeholders are elected and begin meeting, how will your office support that process?
Well, they will need meeting space. They'll need administrative support. Most likely they'll need a website created. Press releases might need to be drafted. So as we enter into this process, we will provide resources, and we will adjust the resources that we provide based on need.
Okay.
And so, we've been through this process before. I know we'll have at least one full-time person at the beck and call of the Board of Freeholders, and then as necessary, we'll add resources.
Okay. What's the current financial status of the county?
Well, it's been a very rough few years. Bob Stevens, our budget manager, has used a number of different terms to describe our financial position. Fragilely balanced, I think, is the most recent term he's used. We believe that we can be calm and not relaxed, but we've got to be diligent. We can't approve a bunch of new spending if we don't get new money to fund it. So we're in a current budget process. We have a 2-year budget cycle, and we're in the middle of that cycle. And in the middle of the cycle, at the end of the first year, we go through what we call the readopted budget process, which is, it's not a full-blown budget, but it's more significant than a mid-year supplemental. And and the guidance that we've given out is that if you don't have new money, don't ask. They ask anyway, and we have a rigorous process we go through to deal with those requests. And there will be some emergency requirements that we'll have to fund. I think Bob calls those must-haves, where if the safety of the public is at risk, we might have to appropriate some money to correct that condition. But if you want to add a staff member and you don't have the money to pay for that staff member, then we have to toe the line.
Sure. Okay. Now, how have you been transitioning to the new position?
Carefully. I've already met with the neighborhood association folks. I've met with Eric Holmes. I've attended a few social events. I mentioned the 3 duties. Principal duty for me, number 1, was to learn the commissioners, learn the schedule, learn how they think, facilitate their work. Like I mentioned before, I already know all the department directors. It's not like I had to get acquainted with any of them. I do need to know in more detail what they do, how they do it, and why they do it, and I'm learning all those things. I have regular meetings with all the directors. So it's been a relatively comfortable transition. I'm feeling very good about it, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
Great. So what are some of your top priorities in the next coming months?
Well, number 1, getting through the budget process without making the county's financial situation any more precarious. I think many of your viewers are aware that we have a number of legal challenges facing us. We want to address those, and we want the outcomes to be as positive for the county and for our taxpayers as we can make them. And the morale of the workforce is very important to me, and so I try to float around the building, get over to the Center for Community Health and meet the staff, and walking, what they call it, managing by walking around. That's a priority of mine. Be present, know what people are doing, recognize them for the good works that they do, and just become more qualified and become better every day at what I do.
Great. Now, how would you prefer to be reached? How can people get a hold of you if they?
Well, I have an email address. It's pretty simple. It's mark.mccauley@clark.wa.gov. We also have a phone number, 397-2232.
Okay.
Staff will answer the phone, and just say who you are and state your purpose, and they'll either take a message or pipe you right into my phone. And I encourage people to reach out and communicate with me. I love the interaction with the public, and I'm here to do the best job I can do, and if there's somebody out there that can help me do that, I'd love to chat with them.
Well, thank you very much, and good luck with your new position.
Appreciate that. Thank you.